So just like we've done before in the past, I want you guys to look at the first, we'll say the first four questions up here, numbers 1, 2, 5, and 6. I don't care which ones you do, but I want you to try to solve them on your own. For this very first question, I'm not going to go through it with you. I'm just going to give you some guidance. You're solving this question for R. All of this like colon variable, these are what you're solving for. So for this question, you're solving for R. For this question, you're solving for X. When you're solving this question, which I would probably recommend doing first, do not plug in 3.14 for pi. Don't do that. So I'm going to give you about, we'll say 2 or 3 minutes. Go through this first page, mainly the first 4, and see which ones you can solve. If you can do all of them, good, do all of them. Remember, when I solve these, I would love to go through every single question, but you've already learned how to do this back in Algebra 1. I'm just refreshing your memory because as the school year goes on, we're going to have to do some literal equations and start isolating variables. So looking at question 1, this is probably one of the easiest questions on the page. And if you're like, no, it's not. Okay, well, let's figure out how. Nicholas, hi. How do I get R by itself here? What should I do?
I think you divide both sides
By who?
by 2 pi.
That's exactly it. 2 pi and R, they're all connected with multiplication. So the opposite or inverse operation for multiplication is just dividing. We're just going to divide both sides by 2 pi. That's it. So that's going to leave me with C over 2 pi is going to equal R. That's it. That's all you have to do. For number 2, that's probably the second easiest question on this page. For this question, it's asking you to isolate X. It wants to get X by itself. Andrew, what can I do to try to get X by itself? So which thing should I do first? Should I divide first or add first? Yes, add first. Add C first. And then do what?
Divide.
That's it. I've heard a lot of teachers say it's like you're doing backwards PEMDAS. You're starting with the multiplying and dividing, or the adding and subtracting, and you're working your way up. You okay?
Yeah.
All right. You're just doing backwards PEMDAS. Start with the adding and subtracting steps first, and then work your way up. I'm going to do 3 more on this first page. Whatever stuff is left is for you guys to practice on your own. We're going to look at numbers 5, 6, and 7. Question number 5 is a little fun. I'll say fun instead of difficult. It's a little fun. So for question 5, it asks you to solve for y. So I'm going to scroll over here. This asks me to solve for y. There's 2 y's in this. That's not normal. Okay, so if something happens like this and you're like, okay, there's way too many y's in this problem, I'm first going to rewrite it. And I at least want to get both of the y's on the same side of the equation. They're both being split up by this equal sign. So let's move either the dy over or the wy over. Since dy is negative, I'm just going to add dy to both sides because I like things to be positive, and I think you guys would probably agree. So wy plus b plus dy. Okay, I have 2 y's. I have b. Let's move this b to the left-hand side just because I want all of the y's on one side and all of the c, or pretty much non-y's on the other side. So we'll subtract b. So c minus b will equal wy plus dy. Now what? Yes, ma'am. Yes, you can factor. Thank you. You're the first person who's actually said it right away. Yes, factor. Factor is the opposite of distributing. So by factoring this out, you're taking both of these y's and making them 1. So if I was to rewrite this, I'm going to put c minus b equals y, and then in parentheses, you'll put the w plus d. That's in front of it. That's it. That's all you have to do. So from here, what else can I do? I know distributing is what operation? What operation is distributing? Begins with the M. Multiplication. You're really just multiplying. So what's the opposite of multiplying? Divide. I'm going to divide both sides by all of this, w and d. So I'm going to write this up here and then divide. So c minus b equals y, parentheses w plus d. I'm going to rewrite it. And I'm going to divide both sides by w plus d. These are going to cancel. And I'm left with c minus b over w plus d equals y. You've seen this before. If you haven't, congratulations, now we did. There's another question on this page that looks very similar to this question. And that problem is number 4 at the bottom of the page. So if you're like, oh, I really didn't know I could factor, yeah, you can do that. So if you need to, star question 4, so that way you can try it later on today. All right, let's look for number 6. If I'm moving too fast, guys, remember, I need to know. Let me know if I'm moving too fast. For 6, we're solving for x. Okay, think of that backwards PEMDAS. We're probably going to have to add or subtract things before we need to multiply or divide. So I'm going to make this 1 over x plus c equals d. Let's move this c to the other side of my equation. So I'm going to subtract c on each side. And now I need to get x by itself. Omar, what can I do to try to get x by itself? Give me a guess. Okay, we can multiply both sides by what? By x. Let's multiply both sides by x. Keep it simple. So we're going to multiply this side by x and this side by x. That's going to leave me with, both of these cancel, 1 equals d minus c times x. There's methods to my madness. There's a reason why I didn't distribute. If I would have distributed here, and you can distribute later if you want to, if I would have distributed, that would have been dx plus, or minus, excuse me, minus cx. What am I solving for? What variable? Does that make sense to have 2 more variables? No, so that's why I'm leaving it as one big one. And then just like we did on the last question, all I need to do now is get rid of this parentheses. And the inverse operation of multiplying, which technically is what you would do when you distribute, is to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by d minus c. So 1 over d minus c is going to be x. If I didn't want to multiply both sides by x, what could I have done instead? I'm going to rewrite the problem so that way you can see it. If I had 1 over x equals d minus c, ignore that stuff in blue. What could I have done to solve this? Spencer? What do you mean multiplied by 1?
Because I divided by.
What do you mean divided by 1? Not quite. Yes, sir. Say it again. What do you mean by inverse? So like this? That's technically what we did here. It's the same thing. Yes, ma'am. What do you mean switch the x and d minus 6? Or d minus c? Yeah, so that is pretty much what I'm thinking of, but that's whenever you're able to do that, that's doing the proportion. This is literally just a proportion. So all I did, like how I put it over here for your first question we did for solving equations, that's literally what you have. So if you can create a fraction by putting 2 or more variables over 1, you can literally create a cross multiplication problem that you can do. You don't have to do this. I'm just trying to open your brain to think of multiple ways instead of believing in just one way to solve a question. Okay, let's look at number 7. This is the last question I'm going to do with you guys on the front page, and then we'll do one big question on the back. For question 7, it's asking you to solve for C. Okay, let me rewrite this first, get my life together. This is just gross. Okay, let me look back at what we did with solving equations. Can't really make this into a proportion. I can't do proportions here because of this stupid plus sign. If this was just 1 over A instead of plus 1 over B, I could definitely do cross multiplication, but I can't. So, okay, well, for this question, whenever we had fractions, we tried to cancel out that fraction by multiplying everything. So that way we were just left with a regular equation like we've seen before. Let's see if we can do that here. Unfortunately for us, for this question, there's not necessarily a common denominator that we can find, like how we had for the last question when we had 6. There's not just a number we can use. So what's a good common denominator we can multiply this whole thing by? C, A, and B, all 3 of those variables. So C, A, and B. And you could put it as A, B, C. It means the same thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply all 3 of these terms by C, A, and B. And when you're multiplying, you're only multiplying the numerators. So we're going to multiply for the first one, C times A times B over C equal to C times A times B over A. And then plus C times A times B over B. That's probably my favorite part of math. What can I do from here? Okay, so first fraction, what cancels? Next fraction? Last fraction. So since I'm still solving for C, remember, don't lose that. We're still solving for C. I'm going to have AB equals CB plus CA. What do you think we're going to have to do here? Distribute what?
Take out.
Take out. What's the word for that? Factor, yes. Anhalt. Anhalt is absolutely right. Factor. So you guys do it. Factor out that C from both of these terms and then divide. Once you finish with question 7, move over to the back side of the page. What's up? Okay, so let's check with that. So we're going to factor out the C. This is B plus A. And then you're dividing, right? B plus A, B plus A. So you're saying that these are going to cancel? You tell me. A and B are multiplied, and are they being multiplied in the denominator? No, they're being added. Because of that stupid plus sign, you can't cancel everything out. If it was B times A, then yes, you can cancel everything out and your answer would be 1. But since I can't do that, your answer is C equals A over B plus, or oh, let's try this again. A times B over B plus A. That's your answer. Good question, though. I haven't heard that all day. So good question. All right, let's look at the question on the back. The question on the back is the style of question we usually give you guys on tests and quizzes. So especially for any freshmen who are in here, this is kind of going to give you an eye opener on what you're going to see for tests and quizzes. So for question number 9, and you can definitely move ahead if you know what you're doing. I'm going to read through the question and we're going to try to solve this the best we can with each other. So it says the regulation size basketball has a volume of 455.9 cubic inches. Use this information to answer the following questions. Approximate your answers to the nearest tenth. Okay, well, you don't have a calculator, unfortunately. So I've already done the calculations for you. So when the time comes, I'll give you the actual number, but I'm going to show you how to solve it without a calculator and with a calculator. So that way you're ready for both. Okay, so for the first question, it says the formula for the volume of a sphere is this equation here. And it asks you to find what is the radius for this basketball. Okay, well, if I'm supposed to find the radius, what am I supposed to do? Help me out. What am I supposed to do if I need to find the radius? Okay, so set the volume, which is listed here, into equal to this equation. So we're going to say 455.9 equal to 4 over 3 pi r cubed. Okay, well, it does ask me to find the radius. So to find the radius, let's solve. This is another literal equation. How am I going to get this equation to get r by itself? What can I do first? Yes, sir. Let's multiply both sides by 3. Let's start off. Multiply both sides by 3. Remember, you don't have a calculator with you, so over here to the side, multiply 455.9 times 3.0. Don't worry, I'll wait. Multiply that out. Tell me what you get when you multiply it. You get it? What'd you get? I love it. If you're still multiplying it out, still finish, but make sure if I didn't give you a calculator on your test or quiz for this, you can still do it by hand. I should never give you anything that's too much for your brain to handle if it's no calculator. Yeah.
So,
3.14. So for this one, don't approximate it. If we do tell you to approximate it, we'll put it in the directions. If we don't tell you to put it or to approximate it, we'll just say leave in terms of pi. So for this question, the problem does say to answer to the nearest tenth. So you would plug that into your calculator. There's a pi symbol that I'll show you guys how to use. But if you don't have that, you're just going to keep it in terms of pi. So just keep pi in the answer. So I still need to get r by itself. 4 pi and r are all being multiplied. So I'm going to divide this by 4 pi, divide this by 4 pi. 1367.7 over 4 pi is going to equal r cubed. What's the inverse of cubing? Cube root. Cube rooting. So you're going to cube root both sides. It's like square root, but for threes. So up here, if I didn't give you a calculator on your test or quiz, this would be your answer. The cube root of 1367.7 over 4 pi, and the units here are inches. And that's going to be my radius. If I did not give you a calculator, that is what you would put for your answer. If I did give you a calculator, you would be able to divide all of this out. And the answer that you would get is 4.8 inches. And we'll have time to actually play around with calculators later on. This is an 8. There we go, 4.8. Read the next question, see if you can solve it without me. So in case I asked you to leave it in exact form, and actually label this out, sorry, I forgot to mention this. This is exact form. And this is, of course, the nearest 10th. Towards the end of the school year, I'm going to be asking a lot of what is the exact form. Make sure you know how to write it. But I digress. After you finish with writing this out for part A, try part B. What's the diameter? You don't need me for this. I'm just helping you. How do you find the diameter? Multiply the radius by 2. And luckily for us, we know the nearest 10th for our radius. Multiply it by 2. It's not difficult. Your diameter should be 9.6. For the last part, I shouldn't need to help you on it, but I mean, I'm already getting this far into it anyway. Let's see what we get. The formula of the circumference of a basketball is C equals 2 pi r. If the circumference of the basketball is 29 inches, is this regulations, or this says regularization. I did not know that was a word. This should say regulation. Is it a regulation size basketball? Okay, so I've seen that before. We said the regulation basketball at the very top has to be 455.9 cubic inches for the volume. I don't know how to determine if this circumference is going to work. Look at everything that we've had. Pretend like this was a test or quiz question. Don't panic or cry. What can I do? What do you mean find the radius?
Here.
So I should compare this radius to the volume?
No, the volume radius is right there.
Oh, the volume radius, this part here.
Yeah.
So remember how, what's your name again?
Andrew.
Andrew. Remember how Andrew literally told us the very first thing, take this 455.9, plug it in for the volume? He knows that this is the equation we're going to use to find the sphere, the volume for that sphere. Well, if we know the radius for it, that's the same value that should be this radius for your regulation size basketball. So if we find the radius here, when reference to your circumference, we should be able to relate that to that 4.8. If the radius we get down here is 4.8, then that means that it will match the regulation size. Good job. Let's go ahead and look at part C. I'm going to take C equals 2 pi r, and I'm going to plug in the circumference. The circumference is 29. So 29 equals 2 pi r. In order to get the radius by itself, do I need to subtract 2 pi or divide? So 29 over 2 pi, technically this is in inches, is your radius. So in case I asked for the exact form, this is what I would want to see. If I asked for the approximate decimal, which I would actually divide or put it into a calculator and simplify, this would be 4.6 inches. I hope that's how you spell tenths, please. So you guys tell me, will this basketball meet regulation? Why not? That's 0.2 off. So this is not regulation size. Not regulation size. Questions or concerns about these literal equations? All right, good.